Welcome to another conversation with Joe Reagan. And Joe, have you ever heard of Wag the Dog?
I have.
Well, let's put it this way. There was a Wag the Dog situation this last Saturday for a birthday party, and I think the dog lifted his leg on the parade.
You know, the wag the dog strategy has generally involved international disputes, and I think what's most alarming is that it goes well beyond the parade, but the situation in Los Angeles and how that's been played up, and this is where I struggle a lot of times, because there's part of me that says, I look at this and I say, well, this is the fascist playbook, just by the numbers.
Yeah.
Right? Create an artificial crisis that empowers you to take on more role as an executive, which ultimately ends in a fascist dictatorship. But then I look at the people that Trump has surrounded himself with, and I'm not 100% certain that they have the competency to even color by numbers and implement such a plan. So I struggle sometimes with this. Is this a deliberate destruction of democracy, or is it just blatant incompetence? And then I ask myself, which is more dangerous? Because the level of incompetence in how this situation is being managed, and you know, when I think of some of the parallels for the let's start with the Marine Corps and the deploying of the National Guard and the Marines to Los Angeles. Well, I guess we should even take a step back, right? What's really happening in Los Angeles? And I can tell you that I have spoken to law enforcement officials that are informed as to what's happening. And this is a very minor protest. It literally is like a city block that there was the issue. And some of the photographs and stuff like that came back and were pretty spectacular, but that was not really representative of the situation. And so you saw the Trump administration really blow this out of proportion.
On purpose.
And that's right. That's the wag the dog piece, right? So now we're seeing a wag the dog scenario of, well, I'm getting destroyed because the economy is tanking. None of my policies are moving forward. The HR1 is getting slaughtered in the Senate.
And the courts are really racking up the
courts
losses.
Are racking. In the only area that the Trump administration is finding even the slightest amount of approval in the public realm is on immigration, is on their stance on immigration. And even that they have to distract from, because they came, and this is how unserious the Republicans are when it comes to immigration, right? And I get it. I think a lot of people in America are truly concerned with the immigration issue. And this is, if you want one piece of evidence as to why Republicans are not serious about immigration, you go no further than the fact that Donald Trump has told ICE that they should hold back on enforcement on farms,
hotels, anything connected with hospitality, restaurants.
Yeah, but yet schools and hospitals are still fair game.
Yeah.
So to make this abundantly clear, we're going to deport potential victims of rape who are going to the hospital to seek care. That's who the Trump administration is targeting. And yet, in the other areas, the people that are actually conducting human trafficking for money to bring workers in so they can be exploited by corporations in this company, we're going to let them stand. And again, we are 6 months into this, and not a single corporation has been held accountable, for, not even for a dime, for hiring undocumented workers. That's how unserious this administration is about. They're all talk and are absolutely 100% not serious about enforcing immigration law. This has nothing to do with immigration policy. So what the Trump administration found themselves in this position of is every policy that they were implementing is deeply, even within the GOP. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at H.R. 1 and what came out of that, the Senate essentially, this is dead on arrival. The Senate's not going to pass it. And it would appear that the adjustments that the Senate's going to make isn't going to pass the House. They've already shattered the very shallow coalition, the one vote coalition that Republicans had pulled together to pass this. I don't even want to call it a bill through the House. And so, like any, again, as the Wag the Dog joke goes, is, well, if we're deeply unpopular, we must create a crisis to do this. And so a relatively small scale protest was quickly exploited to become that crisis. And now we see, the first deployment of the National Guard without the support of that state's governor since like the 1960s. And we see the deployment of 900 Marines as well. And by all accounts, all of those guys have been doing, and gals, are sleeping pretty much in the streets of LA because they didn't give them any money for food or lodging. So you have these Marines that are now in Los Angeles without food or lodging, sleeping in hallways wherever they can. So, but they've manufactured this crisis in LA, all on the heels of the Army birthday parade that cost $45 million, that a number of GOP representatives even had said that this is ridiculous. And the worst part is that this really should have been a massive celebration. The 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States Army. It should be an event that's filled with pride and an opportunity to reflect on the history of what the Army has accomplished. And completely overshadowed because the president's narcissistic tendencies, you'd make it all about himself. And it does. And this is what weakness looks like, right? This is a man that dodged the draft and now, is fundamentally weak, and showing that weakness with this fake aggression and shows, like I said, the military parade that he's wanted for 8 years now because, well, the French did it. Why can't we? Well, the North Koreans do it all the time. Why can't we? Vladimir Putin does it. Why can't we have this? And it's, but it goes back to Teddy Roosevelt. Speak softly, carry a big stick. And that's been how America has worked with its military. We know we have a strong military. We don't need to flaunt it. Everybody knows. Well,
I think the last time, used to have the ticker tape parades in New York.
Yes.
Into World War II, celebration. Mm-hmm. I think when we landed a man on the moon, they had a ticker tape parade. And also at the end of the Gulf War, first Gulf War, I think we had a ticker tape parade.
Yep, that was the last time we had a major military parade.
Trump would have come up and said, I want to celebrate my birthday at the same time, but we're going to have a ticker tape parade in New York. I think it would have been a smash hit. But, you can say that this was a military parade because it bombed. So,
and then you transition that over into what's happening now, where you have the G7 leaders meeting in Canada,
Yeah.
And right off the bat, the president tries to dominate the conversation, and the Prime Minister of Canada rightly shuts him down. He's like, we got work to do.
Yeah.
We don't have time to sit here and listen to your stupidity. We're the world leaders. We got work we got to do.
Well, did you hear about the meeting that the governor of Massachusetts called, along with New Hampshire, Maine, and
In Vermont?
And
I saw the headline. I have not read it yet.
Okay. And they got their Canadian counterparts, and they were doing an economic summit, or you might say a mini G7 right there in Boston, ironing things out and seeing how well they're going to maintain the trade relationships without the U.S. involvement in that picture. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's going to be the governors that are going to save our backsides here.
Well, and there's in the short term, that's unfortunately the necessary fix.
Right.
In the long term, it creates a lot of problems, and we're seeing this in the stock market too, right? So the uncertainty in the stock market, you're seeing investors that are now turning away from the dollar, and dollar dominance has been it's a very important factor. It's a super nerd factor, but it is very. If you don't understand the finance industry, the dominance of the dollar in its usage for international trade is a huge advantage for us.
Right.
And so when you see global traders pushing away from the dollar denomination and now pushing into, the euro and into Chinese and Japanese currencies, you're seeing the Trump administration effectively surrendering American dominance and handing it over to Russia and China. And again, I go back to, there's part of me that says, is this deliberate or is it just blatant incompetence? And again, which is worse?
Yeah.
Because I really do feel like sometimes when you watch this administration, and that includes a lot of members of Congress on the GOP side, and you hear them talking, like, your entire conversation is not grounded in reality. What world are you living in? Because what you're saying isn't real.
Well, if you want to talk about real, I mean, with this Iran and Israeli issue occurring as we speak, and the possibility that the U.S. will agree, or Trump will agree to drop a bunker buster bomb on the nuclear facilities in Iran. And I just listened to Jeremy Bash earlier before we got on here, and he explained that before you even attempt to do something like this, you have to get everybody around the table and figure out, and I will use the word downstream impact of this action.
Yep.
Because how are the allies going to react to it? How is Russia going to react to it? China? And are we really prepared for the downstream impact of this action if Trump agrees to take it and help Israel out? And Jeremy says we're not even close.
Oh God! No.
I mean they're having the meeting right now back in D.C. with the all the head honchos and national, intelligence agency and all that other good stuff. But even those people are not prepared for what could happen.
They're not even in agreement. I mean, again, it's Tulsi Gabbard came out not like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Talking about the intelligence community's assessment on the Iranian nuclear program. And suddenly, she said, "Oh, that's not what I said. No, I didn't. No, that video doesn't reflect what I said." Yeah, that's exactly what you said. And you mentioned the state actors and how the state actors are going to respond to this. Don't forget that the principal way that Iran has influenced power, both regionally and to some extent internationally, has been through essentially state-controlled terrorists. And Hamas is a great example, right? Hamas is, for all intents and purposes, the Iranian proxy
Right.
that has caused the issue. And this is the uncomfortable conversation around the Israel-Palestinian conflict, is that it's Hamas that's the bad actor and causing creation. And Netanyahu's is not responding as well. But that's what leads me towards, this is not deliberate. This is just incompetence of, the art of the deal is transactional.
Right.
Two ways. I win, you lose.
Right.
And the modern world is not that.
Well,
and especially when you talk about Middle Eastern politics, Middle Eastern conflict.
How about saying that the real world isn't wired that way?
It's exactly.
Yes.
And that's where, and I look at what the Navy said today, that now the Nimitz carrier is shifting over to the Gulf,
right.
or to
the Med.
Yeah, it's going to go to the Gulf.
Yeah.
And you're now putting a carrier strike group within the known range of Iranian missiles. There's been plenty of documented examples of Iranian vessels, Iranian civilian vessels, terrorist vessels harassing U.S. ships in the area. Conflicts like these don't always evolve deliberately. Sometimes they escalate because of accidents. And when you have incompetent people at the helm, you substantially raise the risk of escalating a situation unintentionally. And I think now we're talking about, nuclear armed nations having these conversations. And
right now, as we speak, they're moving KC-135s and KC-46s over into Greece, Germany at Ramstein, and I think one of the Arab countries are moving the in-flight refueling capability of the U.S. over there. And the question is, how far are you willing to go, Mr. President, here? Because you're moving a lot of our assets, which in some cases are irreplaceable, in a timely manner. And what are the plans? I mean, moving, the air wings over there, they're moving the ships, carrier groups into the area. I hope we don't get caught in a pincer movement in that area. Or there's 5,000 guys aboard the Nimitz.
And let's also go back to, so you're even seeing this within GOP circles, or even some of the MAGA movement folks are now saying, wait a second, we got behind you because you were against starting more foreign conflict, and now it would appear you're actively escalating it in a region that we've already done this. It didn't work out well. And so, yeah, I think we all, and especially members of Congress, should be asking these questions of, what's the plan? Does the speaker agree with moving forward on essentially creating acts of war without congressional approval? Are we going to go down this path again? And again, if you're fiscally conservative, keep in mind that military action is only going to increase the deficit even more.
Right.
So this is, I don't know how many people voted for Donald Trump listen to this, or if they ever will, but at some point you got to be honest with yourself of saying, you voted for one thing and they're doing exactly the opposite.
Well,
and I'll say it a third time, or maybe a fourth time. I've lost count. right? Is this deliberate or is this incompetent? And I'm not sure which one is worse.
Well, it's a lot of incompetence with a dash of, whatever you want to throw in there. No, because let's face it, there are no real military planners in the administration. I mean, he's planted loyalists in there. And what do these guys know? I mean, you take a look at the Secretary of the Treasury. He's a hedge fund guy.
Mm-hmm.
Hedge fund guys are not really popular, especially when they come in and take over your medical practices and they take over your hospitals. And they go, patients, forget that. Let's make profit before patients.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you have running Treasury. And, of course, you have the Defense, who is just, I don't know how he attained the rank of major. It must have been on a Cracker Jack box, because he's not the brightest bulb in the package. I mean, I forgot the senator's name. He was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, in the Army, and he ran the Pentagon. And Kansas, I think, was senator out of Kansas.
Its name's escaping me too, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
But I mean, when you can have a buck sergeant run the Pentagon and you've got an incompetent major running the Pentagon, God help somebody here.
The difference is the buck sergeant at least had post-service experience,
right,
in the Senate managing policy,
right,
as opposed and I'll be honest, if you look at Hegseth's, his career, our qualifications are pretty similar, and I wouldn't be comfortable running the Department of Defense.
Hey, I'd look forward to it. Now, I'd like to see his evals sometimes. I don't know what you call it in the Army.
That I think one of the best questions, I can't remember if we talked about this last week, but I think one of the best questions I was asked during the last cycle's campaign was, what would your soldiers say about you running for office?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's there's probably no better indicator of your credentials of, hey, the soldiers that you led in combat, what do they think about you?
Yeah.
And I'm going to share this. I'm going to reach behind my camera here because this is where I keep it. I actually keep it right behind this wall, my little Love Me wall, is meant to establish credibility. People see that and they say, oh, wow, that's so nice. You must have done all kinds of cool stuff. But this is a letter I got last cycle from one of my NCOs, which I thought was...
Move it more towards the center.
It was center.
There you go. Good. I wonder if Jeff Crank's got anything like that.
I know we talked about the campaign last week, and I think I spend as much time thinking about or asking myself, why am I the best person to take on this responsibility? And really, I think what I settle back on when I look at the people that run for office so often, they'll say, oh, I was successful in business, or you've got guys like Jeff Crank that have literally spent their entire lives in politics, right? He worked in a congressional office, and then he was a political commentator, and now he's our congressman, but he's never actually done anything.
No.
And I look at, the reason that I reluctantly got into politics was being on the nonprofit side and really being on that front line of where policy meets action. And the fact that when I go out and do my day job, we're talking about this, like, as an example, this HR1 has the SBA reducing funding for veterans programs, for women's programs, for minority programs. And they're not really nothing in the bill actually says what they want to do. And so it's really unclear what this is going to look like. But being in that space and knowing the different players and how that could fold out, the potential could be extraordinarily damaging to veterans, our ability to deliver veterans services. And especially in the areas that I'm working in now with economic development, you're stifling small business growth. And again, I think as Democrats, we need to do a much better job of making that distinction between big business and small business, because small business owners are working class Americans too. And we do need to be able to support them, because small business isn't just about business ownership. It's about having a culture around your community, right? Small business defines that. When you walk downtown, you don't see chains walking down Tejon. Those are, in many cases, independent businesses, and that's what gives our community its special character. And it's because it's local people, local working class people that are doing that. And that's what makes the community special. And we're going to, the Republicans want to throw that away in favor of big box stores, major corporations that don't have that character. And it's sad because you don't see it unless you're actually on the ground out there doing the work. And I think that that's where I look at all the, and what I struggle with is, I had a conversation with a colleague today, and he was, saying, hey, he's like, I really want to see you get into office. I really want to be able to help you. And I said, well, I was like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I feel like if I ask you to help me because of who you work for, that could potentially put you at risk of losing your employment. I mean, I have friends that still serve in the military, and I've been like, hey, if you don't want to talk to me for the next 4 years, I get it. Because your promotion could be at stake. Your family's livelihood could be at stake because you're talking to someone that opposes this administration. And if you look at what's happening in the civil service right now, they're making civil servants take essentially a loyalty oath to the administration as a condition of employment.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. And again, it's just like, you feel horrible with these people. And these are close friends that I've worked with for years that know me better than anybody. And I'm like, dude, just, delete my number. It's not changing. But don't sacrifice your livelihood because, you want to, you feel like you need to support me. But they still do. And that's, we need more of that.
Well, small businesses are basically the engine of the local economies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're so dependent on the federal government here, citywide, that unfortunately it's not going to work out, because when we came here 24 years ago, I was involved with some city stuff, and I was talking to this economics professor at UCCS, and I said, have you ever planned for a BRAC here? And he says, oh, no, we never factored that into our economic models. And I said, well, you better. I said, I just came from California, Sacramento. They shut down Mather Air Force Base, McClellan Air Force Base, which was an overhaul facility that had 40,000 civilians there, gone instantaneously. And it moved into the Bay Area of Treasure Island, Hunters Point, Moffett Field, Alameda Naval Air Station. I mean, it was a bloodbath.
Yep.
And
great.
He said, we've never put that into our economic models at all. And I says, what happens if these troops, you have 5,000, get deployed? And their wives and the kids, they go back home, wherever it is. What do you think that's going to do to your local economy? So,
well, and let's look at, that's a great segue into where we are right now. And it ties it back, it goes right back to the beginning.
Yeah.
right? How unserious this administration, and really the Republican Party in general, is when it comes to immigration. So kind of the big hoopla last week was DHS came out with that list of sanctuary cities, and El Paso County was on it. And everyone was surprised. We said we weren't a sanctuary city. Our city council said we weren't. Our county commissioners said we weren't. And I go back to what I've said numerous times, that their statements were just words. And the lawyers for the city and the county were quite clear that those words had no impact on policy whatsoever. And so the reality is that even in some of the most conservative communities in Colorado, the statements made by GOP politicians are nothing more than words and have zero impact on the law. And it's because they're not serious about immigration. And what that means and how that's going to be used against us is, if you think the Trump administration is going to keep, they might have taken the list down, but don't think for 2 seconds that the administration is going to pull Space Command, because it's not going to allow it to be in a sanctuary city.
Or a sanctuary state.
Or a sanctuary state.
Yeah.
Don't think for a second that funding for any number of military missions is going to go away because of words.
Yes. Okay, Joe, we just about blew through another 30-some minutes of conversation. What do you got to say to wrap it up? I mean, let's send some sweet words out to Jeff Crank saying, you're supporting this crap.
I think even my words wouldn't even crack the surface of what, right? Because he doesn't care. And I would, more importantly, I would say this. I have been clear for a year now. We're coming up on, it's 1 year since I lost the primary election in 24. And I have been clear to anyone that would listen that, no, I intend to and will run again. And there was always a strategy behind that of, hey, I lost the primary and I'm going to support Democratic candidates through the election cycle. I'm not complaining about it. That's what we do. And we get into city council elections. I supported some city council candidates, and we're through that. And now, for me, it's time to ramp it up. And so we've got a launch scheduled for August. We're still putting together some details on it. We're starting to hire staff. We're starting to put together some real campaign operations. So,
at this point in time, I think you better start giving out some websites or something like that.
I was just going to say,
yeah,
if you don't get a phone call from me in the next couple of weeks, it would be really helpful to save me the dime, so I don't have to make the phone call. If you go to reganforcolorado.com and support that campaign, because I think, and like we talked about last week, the Democratic Party still doesn't view this district as being competitive, but we're close. And the way we make that mark is early fundraising. And I hate that money's part of it, but it's not just about the dollar figure. It's the ability to get high quality staff on board early.
That lets me out. But
that's it, right? I think one of the big differences is making sure that we have a very effective ground game. And that does require having folks that really understand the community around me to be able to facilitate that. Because like I said, my goal, my intent is to be that persistent presence around town. I would like to hope that between now and next November, most voters should have at least seen me at something. And you might not even know it. And it is funny. Like I'll sit at Little League games and I'm at all kinds of different events and I talk to plenty of people. By the way, I'll be at the U.S. Senior Open in 2 weeks. So, and I'm checking wristbands. So for all you know, if you go into the U.S. Senior Open, I might be the person checking your wristband as you come into the military outpost there. But but that's what it's all about. But the more support we get early, we can send that message, and that is a message that Crank will pay attention to. Because I'll tell you, once they see those dollar numbers rise and they realize, because I'll tell you, talking to Republicans in this town, they know that I can beat them. And once we start putting dollar signs behind that, people say, oh, yeah, he can do this. That's the message that we can send. And every little bit counts, because it's not just the number. It's not just the dollars. It's the donors that can send that message. So ReaganForColorado.com is where you can find me. And yeah.
Well, I think they ought to send their cards and letters to you too.
Yes, you could always do that, and that would be go to the website. It's the address is 6510A South Academy Boulevard, PMB 298, and that's here in Colorado Springs, 80906. If you want to send me a letter, I got a lot of nasty letters last year, a lot of anti-union, anti-abortion letters last cycle, so I could use some nice fan mail.
They have short memories anyway.
I was always tempted to call some of them. Some people, they actually leave their phone numbers on those postcards. I was always tempted to call them and just be like, I wonder how this conversation's going to go.
Okay, Joe. That wraps up another conversation with Joe Reagan. So thank you so very much, folks. I'm having trouble tonight. I need my nap. And Joe, thank you so very much. Until next time.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everybody.